Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Isa, and today's video is a bit more serious. This video has been requested by some of you for quite some time, and it's about what are symptoms of dissociative identity disorder. This is also a reoccurring question we get when people message us over on Instagram, so we thought it might be time to do a video about this. But it was quite hard to decide whether or not to actually do this, because we don't want to contribute to the stigma that's already surrounding this disorder. We don't want to contribute to hate against the DID community, hate within the DID community, and we also don't want to create lack of trust, etc. So throughout this whole video, you have to keep a lot of things in mind, and it's very important for us to mention them at the beginning so you don't miss them. And these are, firstly, DID is a very complex disorder and it involves a lot of things. There are a lot of things that come along with DID, which causes each system's experience to be different. The symptoms and how strongly they affect each system can vary by a lot, and not only varies the experience or the extent of a system from system to another system, but also from alter to alter within one system. So experiences can differ a lot. Our experience might not be your experience, and just because it's a bit different doesn't make it wrong for anyone. The next thing is that when we talk about symptoms, we talk about general symptoms, general things that come along with having DID, because there are probably a lot more symptoms than we will ever be able to list, not only because we're not able to gather all the information, but also because we might not know about these things. And we don't claim to know everything. We don't claim that everything we say is exactly how it is. It is just how we understand it, how we understand it from the research we did. And for that, our research is based on medical sources, things stated from professionals and specialists, from other systems experience, from other systems information they have gathered, as well as from our own experience and information we have from our psychologist that diagnosed us with DID. But we really want to encourage you to always do your own research and gather your own sources. Don't just believe what one system says, don't just believe what one specialist says, don't just believe what one person says about DID, or in general about anything. Always do your own research, collect your information from different sources, make sure that the type of source is also different. So don't just collect your sources from doctors, therapists, psychologists, etc. But also keep in mind that you might want to get information from people that suffer from this illness, disorder, disability, to get as much sides as possible to be able to create a picture of your own. The next thing is that this video is not a diagnosis video, because not only the things we're going to say are not all the symptoms you might experience, but also because we aren't specialists, as said before, we are not professionals, we haven't studied this disorder, we don't have as good as an experience with this disorder as someone who specializes in this disorder and that works with patients day by day. And we not only aren't in a position to diagnose anyone, but we also really don't want to throw around accusations of who has DID and who hasn't DID, because experiences can vary, and a lot of these symptoms that we're going to list can also occur in combination with other disorders or illnesses, as well as some symptoms can even be experienced by people that don't have any disorder. So diagnosing someone with DID requires a lot of information, more information than we are able to gather from you in a little text, more information than we are able or want to give in one video. And if you suspect you have DID, contact, for example, a doctor or a therapist that either knows about this disorder or that is able to direct you to someone that specializes in this disorder and that really has experience and knowledge of what they're talking about. Someone that specializes in this disorder not only has experience with patients that also have this disorder, but they will also know which questions they have to ask and what information is important, which symptoms of yours might direct or hint towards DID, or if it might be another disorder. So keep all of this in mind, and I really hope that I was able to mention everything before starting this video. But all in all, I hope that's enough for this intro, and let's get started. The first symptom we want to talk about is amnesia or memory loss. And this symptom can be divided into two categories. One is memory loss in the present, and one is memory loss in the past. Memory loss in the past can be linked to trauma in the childhood. This kind of amnesia, this memory loss, can be due to the trauma that caused DID to be developed, and especially if trauma or abuse is happening quite frequently during your childhood, it can cause more large gaps in memory and what you're able to remember, because another alter that's holding this trauma has hold of this memory. Memory loss in the present is usually due to either different alters being out, different alters fronting, different alters having control of the body, or someone being dissociated to the extent that you're not processing a lot of what's going on, so your memory is a bit blurry due to lack of information that can be processed in the time you're out. But more to what this might feel like is memory loss in the present can, for example, be that you suddenly find yourself in a different place. You may be somewhere you don't know, or you might not remember going to where you suddenly are. You might be with different people. You might suddenly be with people you know, or hang around with friends you don't remember getting to. You might be around people that you yourself don't know. Or you find yourself, if you're able to drive and you have a car or the ability to drive somewhere, you might find yourself driving somewhere and not knowing where you are or where you end up. Another thing is you might have also loss of time in terms of you might front one day in the morning, and then suddenly you're in the evening getting ready for bed, or it's suddenly 2 days later, or even a week later, or a month later, and you really have no idea what has happened in between. And this can be very, very scary. And it's also something that when you talk about, it seems quite obvious that something isn't right, even if you don't think of DID or any disorder at first and you don't have an explanation for what's going on. But you can definitely tell when you have these kind of gaps in memory, something's wrong. But there's also a problem and twist to that, because not every system is going out that much that these change in places can be very noticeable. For example, our system, we ourselves, we don't go out a lot due to a lot of reasons. Anxiety is one of them, and also time was always very hard to manage. We had with school and homework and stress and everything, and so we might just find ourselves in a different room in the house, as well as sometimes there can be amnesia around amnesia, which basically means that you don't really notice or question that you forget something, or that you've forgotten something, that you don't remember what has happened, because you don't know that anything has happened. Like, your brain kind of keeps yourself from questioning that something isn't really right. For example, I would wake up in the morning and suddenly it's me being there in the evening making dinner for ourselves, and actually, like, my memory was always like, I know that I've been very forgetful and stuff, and I was often misplacing things, which is also quite a symptom. Misplacing things, forgetting things a lot. But you could also be just very forgetful, so it's not just something related to DID. It's kind of also how you have to organize some stuff, and like in our case, I felt like I couldn't trust myself. I felt like I couldn't trust my memory. I was making lists, like checklists for everything, also including like, did I make dinner? Did I eat for dinner? Have I done math homework? Have I done homework for German? Did I pack my clothes? Did I do this? Did I put away the groceries? Did I clean the dishes? Have I done this and this? And have I gotten ready my clothes for the next day to not forget what I was doing? Have everything packed for school? And each of these little things was a known check on this checklist. And all of these checklists I felt I was making for each day at least twice or 3 times, because I was misplacing these checklists and I couldn't never find them again. And I would not have no idea where they went, because I was so sure I put them in one place, and then I wouldn't find them at all, or I would find them in a completely different place, and I wouldn't remember that I put it there, as well as I wouldn't remember that I put stuff or checked stuff up, and when I look these things through, then I've done it, even though I don't remember. It was a whole mess, and that's just one thing we wanted to include, because it's something a lot of people or systems talk about, being just memory loss in the present, and organizing stuff is quite hard, or can be quite hard, especially if you don't know you have DID, and or if you don't have the ways of learning how to communicate with your system or your system members. The next thing we want to talk about is also a symptom that's in the name of this disorder, which is dissociation. Dissociation is a response to trauma, and because DID is a disorder that is based on trauma, it's often it often accompanies DID and is quite commonly experienced by systems and alters of systems. Dissociation it's a disconnection between a person's sensory experience, thoughts, sense of self, personal history, and people. It's very stormy today, and people can feel very people that experience dissociation can feel a loss in their sense of time, of personality, of identity, of their surroundings. It interrupts 4 areas of personal functioning that are usually working together quite smoothly. These 4 areas are consciousness, identity, memory, and self-awareness. And of course also the awareness of the surroundings. So what dissociation feels like for us, or for myself, I'm not sure if our other alters would describe it like that as well, since I don't have a lot of communication with them. But for me, dissociation feels like everything is going too fast and way too slow at the same time. And also everything feels to be way too loud, like everything's screaming at you, but also like it's way too quiet, and it's just very hard to explain. And it's really just the way that your brain isn't able to process the information it's getting. So everything seems very messy and very confusing, and with dissociation can also come to other things, which are one's depersonalization and derealization. Depersonalization is that you lose your connection to self-awareness and your own identity. So when we talk about this, we mean that the things you experience feel like they're not you experiencing them, and may feel like you watch someone experience these things from another perspective. Derealization, on the other hand, is when you lose awareness to, or your sense to, your surroundings, which makes everything feel unreal. It might feel like being in a dream, like not being awake. And this can also be very hard to process and hard to get out of. And with dissociation, again, it's something that comes along with a lot of trauma disorders, not only DID. The next symptom we want to talk about is hearing voices. With DID, hearing voices is related to hearing other alters talk in your headspace. The next symptom we wanted to talk about is hearing voices with DID. And when you have DID, the cause of hearing voices is usually the result of other alters. They might be talking to each other, they might be talking to themselves, they might even be talking to you, but the cause is other alters. There's also something that's called bleeding of emotions or thoughts, which means that the walls that separate alters get a bit thinner, and thoughts or feelings can seep through and mix with your own. And this can also cause you to hear their thoughts or feel their feelings, as well as when alters are near the front and near in the headspace, it can also occur that you hear what they say, what they think, what they talk about, etc. For myself, I never thought or felt like it was strange, or I thought for quite some time that it wasn't strange to hear voices. When you don't remember anything else, and you don't feel anything else, and you don't grow up with anyone talking about this, that it's not something usual that occurs usually, you don't feel it's different. It just started later when we grow up throughout the years that we got the portrait that media has made of people that hear voices. The way the society is portraying this is just very negative. A lot of the times it's associated with the person that experiencing these things being crazy or being liars, which really, really messed with a lot of my feelings for myself as well. It was very hard to ever talk about this. I've never mentioned that until a time where we were at a point again where we just didn't know what to do anymore, how to go on, and we felt that no one's really understanding what's going on until we stumbled upon a video about DID, and it was like someone was talking about our experience, about what I'm going through. And so we really, really, really gathered so much. We've done so much research about this disorder. We looked up things and we listened to more stories of other systems, and we also asked people around us if they've noticed stuff, because we were so forgetful and I was never able to always say what was going on because I wasn't out all the time. So that has been quite a thing. But I think until then I never really talked about hearing voices. I did mention a lot that I refer to my voices as my head. I always differentiated me from that, because it wasn't me thinking or saying these things like in my head, in the headspace. So I never referred to these thoughts or what I thought were thoughts as my thoughts. I always referred to them as my head thinks this and this, which later on made sense. But it's not about my diagnosis. So the next thing I want to talk about is not really a symptom, but more something that usually accompanies DID, which are comorbid disorders. Comorbid disorders are basically, just as said, a disorder or disorders that usually go along with another disorder, which can be depression, eating disorders, anxiety disorders, borderline personality disorder, etc. And these disorders, if they are there in a system, can affect alters differently and in different ways. Some alters do have disorders, some alters have more than one disorder. I, for example, have borderline personality disorder. I'm diagnosed with depression, and in September, so really soon, we're going to someone that specializes in anxiety disorders to talk about my anxiety. But that to the side, not every alter in a system suffers from a disorder, not every alter suffers from a disorder to the same extent as another alter does, which doesn't mean that your problems or struggles are worth more or less than the struggles someone else is experiencing. It's just that everything is affecting everyone differently, and there can also be alters within the system that are not affected by any disorder at all and that don't have any disorder. Because of comorbid disorders and because comorbid disorders are very common with having DID, it is also very hard to diagnose someone with DID directly at the start. A lot of systems go through a lot of times being misdiagnosed or being diagnosed with something, but there's more to it. And I don't blame like the doctors, because it's really hard to figure out if someone has DID or not, because the doctor might just talk to one alter and doesn't know about the problems another alter is experiencing. When you're, for example, in a doctor's session and talking to someone that wants to diagnose you or gives you like a layer of paper with questions on them to help you fill it out, like one alter could check or tick all the spaces, and when, for example, an alter ticks the spaces and they suffer from depression, but another alter is also suffering from an eating disorder or from an anxiety disorder or borderline personality disorder, like the answers can vary for each alter, which can make it hard to determine what's going on when you're just doing one thing. And sadly, like in hospitals or when we were at therapy sessions, they were always like interested in like the first session we talked to someone, and then it wasn't like, it didn't really matter. And when we would switch out, for example, and someone else was going into therapy, we were often accused by our therapist for making stuff up, and that we are very annoying for having different problems, that it was very annoying that one day we would have depression and one day we wouldn't have any problems at all. Some days we had struggles with our selves and the body, and they were really annoyed at us, and it was very disheartening and frustrating. So we were always kept in the boxes doctors or psychologists put us in, and when we told them that these things don't match and this is not what I'm experiencing, or I don't have these problems, they didn't want to listen after the first time, and we just haven't made the best experience with doctors, psychologists, specialists, etc. So that's one thing. And sadly, a lot of other systems also don't have the best experience with doctors and specialists, because the media and society portrays DID as a disorder that's very rare. It's also very differently portrayed as the reality really is. But again, being misdiagnosed and stuff is not only because people don't really think about DID, it's also because DID is very good at disguising itself and being hidden from other people, and it's also good at hiding itself from yourself, and you might also not really know what's going on until you get diagnosed. Every system's experience is different and every system's story is different, but it's still valid, and we want to contribute to the whole picture. We want to tell our story, and we want to help destigmatize this disorder, and we don't want to have to fight for our existence. We just want to spread love. We want to help our community, and we want to help others learn about the different sides of DID. The next symptom we want to talk about is headaches. And whether you have DID or not, you will probably have had headaches in the past, at least once. But when you have DID, headaches are quite common. The cause of your headache can not only be due to muscle pain or muscles being tensed, sleeping unwell or being like sleep deprived, or change in weather or migraines. The cause for someone that has DID can of course be one of the things before as well, but there's also the possibility that when you are switching a lot, or a system is very switchy and they switch out a lot, which means there's a change in alter. Switching is quite a stressful progress for yourself and your brain. All of the stress can cause headaches, as well as there can be hormonal imbalance when alters switch out. And all of this can cause headaches. These headaches don't go away with painkillers. Like, painkillers usually don't work because painkillers work against a different cause than what's causing headaches from being switchy, dissociating, etc. So that's one thing. I know that there are quite a lot of other symptoms, but I'm feeling quite dissociated. I'm feeling like my mind is going blank and I'm starting to dissociate. My voice is getting cracky, and I know that this video is already quite long. I just hope that you were able to enjoy this little video. I hope this video might help you get a little overview on how hard it can be to figure out what's going on. And again, if you suspect you have DID, go talk to someone who specializes in this disorder. Do your own research. Don't just believe what you hear or read somewhere. You don't have to believe everything we say. We don't claim to know everything or speak for everyone. We are just telling our experience and what we know. So keep that in mind. We love you, and go subscribe to our channel if you're new. Check out our Patreon, our Ko-Fi, and we will see you guys next time. Goodbye.